Okay, good morning, girls. The first thing you need for today is your packet that I gave out on the last day before we left school. And if you don't have that, it's posted up on Google Classroom. It's Unit 7, Meiosis and Genetics. It says it's a Google Slides. So you can print it out in color or print it out in black and white, whatever you have. Um, so I'd like to start this unit with this picture. And here are these two beautiful young girls, and here they are a few years later, probably as teenagers or young adults in their early 20s. So um, one thing about these girls that's interesting is that they are twins. So the question that I'd like to ask is, how can these twins look so different? They are biological sisters. They have the same biological father and the same biological mother. So how is it possible that these two fraternal sisters, fraternal twins, can look so different? Well, the answer has to do with genetics and meiosis. And you can see this is a how question here. And how questions are hard to answer, but they are satisfying to answer. And we use science and biological concepts to answer this specific question. So here's an observation. We have two twins that look very different. How is that possible? So in order to give us an understanding of meiosis and genetics, we're going to use an example that we started with last chapter. And that has to do with, let me move this here, with sickle cell anemia. So down here, this woman could be, she could have normal red blood cells or she could have sickle red blood cells. So if she had these, she would not have sickle cell disease, and here she does have sickle cell disease. And I'm going to use the term sickle cell disease and sickle cell anemia interchangeably. So you don't need this slide, it's just there for reference. You can go on to the next slide, which looks something like this. Not exactly, I changed it a little bit since I posted it. So I'm going to ask questions throughout this presentation to help you come up with an answer to the major question, which is this. Is it possible for two normal parents to have a child with sickle cell anemia? So down here we have a mom and we have a dad. Is it possible when they have a daughter to have a child with sickle cell anemia, even though neither of them have it? And we're using sickle cell anemia here because sickle cell anemia is an inherited disease. So let's make sure we write that somewhere down on this page. I think you have some white space down here. Sickle cell anemia is an inherited disease. Skin cancer, in some cases, it is a disease, but it isn't necessarily an inherited disease all the time. So for example, if you expose yourself to ultraviolet light, you are more likely to get mutations and more likely to get cancer, but you didn't inherit that susceptibility to cancer. It's something you were exposed to over your lifetime. Same thing with x-rays. If someone gets x-rays all the time, they will likely get cancer, but it's not because they inherited a gene for cancer like people do with retinoblastoma. So sickle cell anemia is an inherited disease. We know that. So is it possible for two normal parents to have a child with sickle cell anemia? Don't know. Well, some of you might know and some of you might not know. Some of you might already say, yes, I know it's possible. Some of you might not know at all. Some people may say it is not possible. So let's suppose here, so we're going to figure out the answer to that question. I'm just going to move this off to the side here so you can't see it. I don't know where to move it. So here's mom. This pink person represents mom, and then this blue person represents dad. So here's mom and here's dad. And they're the parents, and they have normal red blood cells. And what the hemoglobin, what the molecule in those red blood cells looks like on a molecular level is this right here. Okay, here we have a normal hemoglobin molecule. Here's another one. And you can see that they are just fine. Let me make sure I get my timer back up here. Okay, we've got 7 normal hemoglobin molecules. So if these two people were to have a child, let's see if I can use my stylus pen here. What do we think? Is it going to be possible? Maybe yes, maybe no. Is Bluetooth going to come up? Maybe not. All right. That's a plan for another day. Get out of there. Oh, there it is. That's so exciting. Kachinga. Oh, Joe Bunny. So here we're going to put an X in between mom and dad. That's called a cross. That means mom and dad are mating and that they're going to have a baby. So in genetics, when we have two people or any kind of problem, we always put an X to indicate a cross, meaning that they're mating. Okay, so mom and dad mate. Is it possible for them to have... Oh, Joe Bunny, get out of there. This is fun. I actually practice with this despite what this shows. He's still on there. Come on, buddy. I think he's gone. He's gone. Okay. So, will their daughter, here's their daughter down here. Will their daughter have sickle red blood cells? So how in the world is that possible? Can you get a child with sickle cell anemia from two parents that didn't have one? And I bet a lot of you probably have said it in your head. Well, sure, it's possible. They are carriers. So we're going to see, what does that term carrier mean? If you knew that, that's great. If you didn't, that's not expected to. So we're going to go through to see, is it possible? How? How is it possible? At the end of this unit, you're going to be writing an argument similar to what you did for the peas and the garbanzo beans, the chickpeas. And that's going to be your assessment for this unit. You will answer this question in an essay format, and that will be your big grade for this unit. So if this daughter has sickle cell anemia, if her red blood cells are the sickle shape, the molecules of hemoglobin in her blood look like this. They are neutered. They are stuck together. And so we saw that last chapter. They are sticky. Let's see if I can back. Oh, I did it. Yes. Okay, next question. So we know that sickle cell anemia is an inherited disease, meaning it's not contractable, it's not like the coronavirus, it's not like HIV, it's not like the flu. We know it's inherited, it's not infectious. So how many genes control sickle cell anemia? We know diseases that are inherited are caused by genes. So how many genes control sickle cell anemia? Do you know? We did an example of this last chapter. We went over this, but I'm going to refresh everybody's memory. It's actually controlled by one gene. So you're going to write a little 1 next to this question here. How many genes control sickle cell anemia? 1. And let me just point out that this is really rare. Very few diseases and very few traits in humans are controlled by just one gene. It's usually lots of genes on lots of different chromosomes contribute to a disease or contribute to some specific trait. So I want you to know that this is the exception rather than the rule. Okay, so, and just to remind ourselves what a gene is, even though we had it in the last section, genes are recipes for proteins. So if we need to write that down, let's go ahead and do that. Genes are recipes for proteins. They are sequences of nucleotides. So let's make sure we refresh our memory with that too. Genes are sequences of nucleotides. Okay, where is this gene located? Where are genes located, ladies? Where are they located? They are located on... That's right, you got it right. They are located on chromosomes. They are not located on old ribosomes or Golgi apparatus. They are located on chromosomes. So here I have a sketch or a model of a chromosome. Anybody know what chromosome this is? Thinking way back to last unit, we highlighted a lot of diseases that are on this chromosome. This is chromosome 11, ladies. So let's just label that chromosome 11. We have 23 different kinds of chromosomes, and it's specifically on chromosome 11. Okay, now, how many copies of the gene for sickle cell anemia are in each body cell? So I want you to highlight the word copies there, meaning how many genes do we have in each and every cell for sickle cell anemia? Okay, now to help us answer that question, I'm going to show you this picture, and we all know what this is by now. This is called a karyotype. Okay, so if here's a picture of all the genes in one of your cells. Where's my mouse here? Slow yourself down. How many copies of the gene? Well, we know that sickle cell anemia, the gene for sickle cell anemia is on chromosome 11. So here is chromosome 11. Maybe we want to highlight this or circle it in another colored pen. This is chromosome 11, and you can see we don't have just one chromosome 11. We actually have two chromosome 11s in each and every cell, because these two chromosomes are homologous, meaning they're the same kind. They're the same kind of chromosome. So, okay, so how many copies of the gene for sickle cell anemia are in a body cell? What do you guys think the answer to that question is? So if these are all the chromosomes in one cell, how many copies of the gene for sickle cell anemia are in a body cell? The answer is 2. There's a gene for sickle cell anemia on this chromosome 11, and then there's the gene on this chromosome 11. So there's 2 genes for sickle cell anemia in each and every body cell, because we have 2 chromosome 11s. Okay, now let's see how we're doing on time here. 12 minutes. Okay, now how many alleles control sickle cell anemia? Alleles, we learned that word last unit too. Alleles. Let's remind ourselves what alleles are. So maybe you want to write it up here. Alleles are just versions of genes, just like you can have an iPhone 8, or you can have an iPhone X. Are they X10? I don't even know what that is. I don't think there's an iPhone 9. iPhone 7, there's different versions. So it's kind of like getting, if iPhones are like chromosomes, you get an iPhone 8 from your mom and an iPhone X or 10 from your dad. So you would have like 2 iPhones. They're the same thing. They're both phones, but they are different versions of the same chromosome or the same object. Okay, so there could be many alleles, and if you don't know, that's fine. But we did a little bit about this last unit, so to remind ourselves, there are 2 alleles that control sickle cell anemia. The first one is, we're going to represent the first version, the first allele, as a large or a capital A, and we just say big A in genetics, so that's big A. And then the second allele is little a. So how many alleles control sickle cell anemia? 2. In lots of other traits, there could be 6 alleles, there could be 7 alleles, and if we have time at the end, maybe we'll talk about the genetics of labs, so you can see multiple alleles, or more alleles than 2. And we'll talk about like yellow alleles, and brown alleles, and chocolate alleles. How do we get all these different colored labs, Labrador retrievers? Okay, where are we? Go back on the bus. Big A and little a. Okay, now little a is a version of a gene. It's an allele. And little a is a version of a gene. It's an allele. So little a, let me go back up the bus here. Big A, let's write big A equals, and we're going to write that means normal hemoglobin. Okay, big A equals normal hemoglobin, and little a equals abnormal hemoglobin, or sickle cell hemoglobin. Okay, now you'll notice that this A here is a capital, we call it big A. That's because the trait is dominant. So let's write A equals dominant, and little a down here, that equals recessive. And we're going to talk about what dominance and recessive are in the next video.